Right, sorry about the delay, guys. I was just waiting for all others to join. I'll start sharing my screen and we can start the session today. Yeah. So, hope my screen is visible now. Maybe you can give a thumbs up if you're able to see. Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Varun. Mm, all right. Thanks, Vishwas. All right. So, before we get into the deep dive into the session, a quick introduction about myself. So, my name is Anand, and I have a total of 15 years of experience in IT. And for the past 7 years, I've been working as an Azure platform architect, primarily working on Azure cloud. Right. So that's a quick intro about me, and this is my LinkedIn profile, which I will share it in the chat also. And also, I run a blog where I post regularly on topics related to Azure. So the blog is always learn.in. So you'll find different topics related to Azure, and I usually explain stuff in a very low level, right? Which will help everyone to understand, even if they don't have any knowledge. So that's my blog and LinkedIn profile. So you're always welcome to follow that. All right. So jumping on to today's topic. So what I'm going to talk for the next 1 hour is authentication and authorization in Azure Kubernetes Service, right? So as part of this agenda, what I'm going to cover is the different types of authentication methods that we have in Azure Kubernetes Service. I'll start calling it as AKS, the abbreviation for Azure Kubernetes Service. So different types of authentication and the best practice is what I'm going to talk about in this session today. Okay. So before jumping on to the topic, I will so why this topic? So I will let you know why are we even picking this topic, right? So first of all, if any of you from Azure background, you might very well know that the authentication is different for different resources, right? Not every resource will behave the same way when it comes to authentication, right? For example, you have a key vault, even with an owner permission, you'll not be able to view a secret because Key Vault has got something called as data plane operations. So you need a Key Vault secret officer. So there are different kinds of authentication based on the resource that you work in Azure, right? Key Vault, storage account, blobs, you cannot view it with a normal contributor role. So when it comes to AKS, it's more different than these resources, right? When it comes to the AKS, it's quite different and it's a bit complex, and that's why I have chosen the topic. So basically, if you want to learn the authentication and authorization in AKS, you will jump into the Microsoft documents, right? You'll Google some Microsoft documents, and if you read the Microsoft documents, it will be crazy, right? There'll be hundreds of links in the document, which will take you to several pages, and it'll be very complex for us to understand. So that's why I've taken this topic broken down into pieces, and uh, I'll give the information that is only required for you, okay? Not dumping all the information. And also, I'll show you demo sessions, not just complete theory. I'll show you a demo sessions, which will be a bit interesting. So that's the reason why I've taken this topic, okay? So basically, jumping on to the actual topic now. Sorry, guys, let me just see if anybody is waiting in the lobby. Okay, all right. And during this walkthrough, if you want to stop and ask questions, you are always welcome. Please feel free to do that. Any question is absolutely fine. Don't feel it's a very silly question. Any question is absolutely fine. No issues at all. So, all right. So when it comes to the basics of authentication in Azure Kubernetes Service in AKS, so two types of access is required for us to operate the AKS cluster, right? Let me just quickly check if I've started the recording. Okay, right. So two types of roles or two types of access level is required for us to completely work on an AKS cluster, right? So what are those two types at a high level is, so you need to be able to do cluster level operations. So when I say cluster level operations, maybe you call it as infra level operations, or even in Azure terms, you call it as control plane operations, right? So what are these control plane operations basically? What are these infra operations? So nothing but your AKS will have some infra components that is used to run the AKS cluster, right? For example, your node pools, if you want to scale your node pools, if you want to integrate with virtual network, your Kubernetes version upgrade, all these examples fall under the infra operations category. So you don't feel it'll be, I mean, don't feel that it might be a bit confusing for you, but as I show the examples, it will become very clear for you. Okay. So cluster level operations are basically, I'll show the Kubernetes cluster portal so that it makes more sense for you. So as you can see here, whatever you see under the settings, right, most of these are cluster level operations. So these are the infra foundation resources that help to run the AKS cluster. So you can, so to scale, to modify these infra operations, right? To do these infra operations, you need a different level of access, which is nothing but you might need contributor or owner or Kubernetes services contributor. So that's the control plane actions, right? Infra level operations, you need the regular contributor, owner, or Kubernetes services contributor to perform the infra level operations. On the other hand, you have the API operations in AKS cluster. So when we say API operations, it's not any of these operations, not any of these infra operations, but under the Kubernetes resources, you see all these the internal resources of the AKS, right? When I say internal resources, nothing but a best example is a pod. So viewing the pod and viewing the node, the namespaces, viewing the deployments and secrets, and applying a secret, creating a pod, creating a deployment. So all these fall under the API operations, which are the internal resources within AKS and not the infra resources used to manage the AKS. These are internal resources within the AKS. So all these that you see here, even to view a storage, you need different level of access. So that's what we call it as API operations or data plane actions. Some of the examples I have given it here. So those are two types of actions that you do on an AKS cluster at a high level, right? Cluster level operations and API operations. Now, jumping on to the access required, right? So to do cluster level operations, as I said earlier, you need contributor, owner, or so if you're from the Azure background, right, you very well understand these roles. Contributor and owner will allow you to do most of the infra level operations in other resources also. Like for example, if you take a virtual machine, with contributor you can do most of the operations in a virtual machine, and with owner also the same, you do most of the operations with a virtual machine. Similarly, you will have a virtual machine contributor. In the context of a virtual machine, you will have a virtual machine contributor with which you can do any operation on a virtual machine. Similarly, for AKS, we have a Kubernetes service contributor, which will allow you to do the infra level operations of an AKS cluster, which is nothing but I have shown here. The infra level operations are the one that comes under the settings, networking, node pools, and all that. So that's the access that's needed for an infra level operation. And when it comes to API operation, right, like viewing the pods, creating deployments, and all of those internal resources operations, we need a different role and a different authentication method is used for all of that. With an owner role, you'll not even be able to view a pod. With any of these three roles, you'll not be able to view a pod because that's requires a different level of authentication, which is what I'll be explaining. The different methods of authentication is what I'll be explaining, right? So for this, we have basically three different types of access mechanism to do an API operation. So this part you be very clear for any infra resources. You all that you need is one of these three roles. You don't confuse this with the API operations. Okay, just keep this aside. Uh, and all that we need to focus more is the API level operation, which is what is more confusing and more complex, right? Uh, okay, so before I move on, any questions from anyone? Just stop here. Yeah, yes. Please.
Uh,
Yeah.
yes, Anand. So, like, if we want to give access to a third-party team from out of organization,
Mhm.
so what kind of RBAC can we provide to them? Are there anything built in specifically to it?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you will have to provide access to a third party team or another team or another member of your team, right? So in that case, what access you should be giving is depends on what they really need. Okay. And also,
Okay, let's
uh,
say we need only reader access to a out of organization team
okay.
itself.
Okay.
So what kind of least privileged reader is available to us? In case of Kubernetes itself, we can take, as
Okay.
you shown.
Okay, got it. So, reader. So basically, there are two different types of actions we need to consider when it comes to reader. One is they want
Mm-hmm.
to be able to view the Kubernetes resource itself, like this in the Azure portal, right?
Yes.
With a normal reader, the Azure RBAC role, there is a reader role. With a normal reader,
Yes.
they'll be able to view all of these AKS infra resources. Okay, but with the
Okay.
same reader they'll not be able to view the sorry infra resources are under settings, so they'll be
Mm-hmm.
able to view the node pools or networking, all this stuff. But the same reader role will not allow them to view the namespaces or workloads. I'll show you an example here. So I have
Okay.
all these demo, I'll be showing it to everyone to make it very clear. So here, this is an user. I opened a different same cluster with a different user. Okay. As you can see here,
Mm-hmm.
this user has got reader access to the AKS cluster. Okay. He'll be
Okay.
able to view node pools, all these infra related resources, but he's not able to view any of the pods that comes under the workloads. Access is forbidden
Okay.
because your reader will not help you to view these resources because it's an API operation. It is an internal resource in AKS. So for this, what
Mm-hmm.
role you should be giving is depends on the access mechanism that we choose. Okay, which I will explain now. The access, different types of
Okay.
access mechanism is what I'm going to walk through.
Okay.
So I'm also going to show you what is the current access for these users. Okay.
Yes.
As you can see, my Anand Rao 2 is this one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is only a reader. I don't have any other role. So just ignore this. Anand Rao 2 is what is this one, okay? And only role that is given is reader. So not able to
Mm-hmm.
view any of
Yes.
the API workloads. Right. Now
Okay.
let's
Okay.
yeah. Now let's jump on to the different types of access. And once I complete this, I'll tell you what level of access to be given to view the internal resources of Kubernetes, the very least role. Okay.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, as I have said, API operations are nothing but different types of internal resource operations, right? viewing the pods and deploying resources, Kubernetes resources, and all that. And how do we do this API operation is basically we first do the for an API operation, you need to do two different things. You need to get authenticated and also you need to get authorized. Okay. So how do you get authenticated is this is the command that you need to run to get authenticated. I mean, when it comes to command level operations, right? Forget about Azure portal. Let's say we want to deploy pods and view pods from the Cloud Shell. So the first thing that you'll be doing is you'll be running this command to get authenticated. Let's see how we can do that. Okay. So this is an user who has got only reader role. So it's my resource group name and my I mean the Kubernetes AKS resource name itself.
I think the hyphen is incorrect.
Yeah,
That copy paste is causing a different hyphen there.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Just hold on, just a moment. Okay. So as you can see here, I'm getting an error message which I'll be explaining. Okay, the first step is to get authenticated, and to get authenticated, you need to run this command. And what level of rules are required, I'll be explaining it later. Okay. So once you get authenticated, what it means is you're inside your AKS cluster, but you don't have access for any API operation. You have just landed the gate. You've gone. It's for example, it means you've gone inside the gate, but you don't have access to any of the rooms, something like that, right? So you are inside your AKS cluster now. Once you get authenticated using this command, but you will still not be able to do any API operation. So you will not be able to run this command. kubectl get pods will give you a failure message. So that's how you get authenticated using this command. Okay. So now coming to, so I wanted to explain all this before running into the different types of authentication methods. So how do you do an API operation is what you need to understand before jumping into the actual types of authentication. So now jumping into the actual types of authentication, you have three different types of authentication. One is local accounts with Kubernetes RBAC, Entra ID with Kubernetes RBAC, Entra ID with Azure RBAC. So let's ignore the local accounts with Kubernetes RBAC, which is least secure, least preferred, and it causes more confusion. I'll talk about it at the end of the session. So we'll jump on with the first method, which is Entra ID authentication with Kubernetes RBAC. Okay. So here, what we want to achieve is using an Entra ID, we authenticate to the AKS cluster, and for authorization, we use a Kubernetes RBAC role. So as I said, when we say authentication, right, we are just entering the AKS cluster. We are entering inside the AKS cluster using an Entra ID Azure RBAC role. And once we are inside the AKS cluster, we are using a Kubernetes RBAC role to do the API operations. Okay. So first thing is, as I said, using an Entra ID Azure RBAC role, we need to get authenticated to the AKS cluster. So by running this command, we first get authenticated to the AKS cluster. So which is this command, but what role is required to run this command? So there is a different Azure RBAC role. So you're, sorry, did someone have a question? Okay. Um, so to get authenticated, you need a different role, an Azure RBAC role to run this command, right? So currently this user has not got that role. So it is clearly telling in that message. So there are a couple of roles that will help to get authenticated. Okay, that roles I will show it to you. So any one of these roles will help to get the user authenticated to the AKS cluster. So those roles are covered in the slide as well. So as you can see here, these are the roles that will help to authenticate to the AKS cluster. Right. So let's assign one of these roles here, and I'll show you how what difference it makes. So from another user, this is another user who has got an owner privilege. I'll assign an owner role for the other user, okay? Because owner role also helps to get authenticated. Owner, as you can see here, right? This is the user. Okay, so now we have assigned a owner role for this user, which will help to get authenticated, and we take some time to reflect. Okay, so I run the same command. Once I given the owner role, I'm able to get authenticated. Okay, authentication basically downloads a kubeconfig file and it lets you inside the cluster. But once my authentication is over, I'm now trying to do an API operation. Okay, so when you try to do an API operation, it will ask for a device login here. Okay, now just notice this, guys. So I'm trying to do an API operation. Even with an owner role, I'm an owner on this AKS cluster, which is this cluster, AKS Entra ID cluster. Just prove that. Sanandra 2, I'm an owner on this cluster, but I'm not able to do any API operation. kubectl get pod, get deployment, or even creating a pod. Clearly says that I don't have an access, cannot list resource deployments and API groups. And this is because our cluster is currently a Entra ID based cluster. Okay, Entra ID with Kubernetes RBAC. So I'll show that where it is configured. So when creating the cluster, I've chosen the Entra ID authentication with Kubernetes RBAC. So when this is chosen, what it means is your authentication is done with Entra ID role, which is nothing but contributor or owner. In our case, we assigned an owner, and your API operation, your authorization will be done using a Kubernetes RBAC role. So we need to assign a Kubernetes RBAC role for this user. In this method, we are assigning a Kubernetes RBAC role for this user. Okay, so I'll show you how we can do that assignment. So basically, we have a YAML to do that role assignment. So this is the YAML, and this is the user that we want to assign a cluster role. Basically, it is a predefined role which will help to view the resources. View the resources in the sense kubectl get pods is an API operation. It will help us to do the API operations, read level API operations. Right. So let's see how we can apply this. I have this manifest saved locally, and to apply this, right, there is a level of access required. So you cannot run it from here. This user is an owner, and this owner cannot create a role, right? So basically, when doing an Entra ID based authentication, we configure a group, something like, let me show that to you. So when creating the cluster, right, we choose this option, and we also configure a Entra ID group. Entra ID group is nothing. What this means is, this group that is configured, any users that are part of this group will be able to do any operation, API operation. Okay, so we need to one of the member from this group can do a role, create a role for another user. Okay, so this is the group that is configured during the cluster creation, and as you can see, one of the member which I've already logged in as this member. So, and as you can see, why this user is able to view everything here is because this user is part of the Entra ID group that's configured during the cluster creation and attached. Okay, that's why this user on the AKS is able to view everything. And let me try to open up the cloud shell also here and show you the difference. Okay, as you can see here, he is able to view the pods. This user is able to view the pods because this user is part of the Entra group that is attached here. Right? As you can see here, this Entra group, whoever is part of this Entra group has got the full cluster admin role. And we can also verify that, okay, how this user has got the cluster admin role. So just run a command. So as you can see here, the cluster admin binding, this is the group ID, okay, 301, which you can see here, 301 ending with EC1, and who is a cluster admin. Okay, so the concept with Entra ID with Kubernetes RBAC is, initially when creating the Kubernetes cluster, it will ask you to choose a Entra group. Okay, and once you choose that Entra group, whoever is part of that Entra group gets the default full admin access. Okay, and this user, whoever is part of this group, they can assign roles to other users. For example, in our case, there is a second user who is not able to do any API operation currently. because he has not got a Kubernetes RBAC role, right? So let's see how we can assign enable the second user to be able to do the API operation like get pods. Okay, so here we are going to create a role binding for that user. This is a cluster role binding which is gets created by default, and we are going to assign a role binding, a normal role binding. Currently there are no role bindings. Okay, so let's assign a role binding for that user. I'm using this manifest file. So let me first upload the manifest file, RBAC roles, and I'm using this command to apply that manifest. Okay, role binding got created, and as you can see previously there were no role binding, and once we created this, you see this role binding. Nothing but the YAML manifest that we applied, which allows this user, the second user, to be able to view the Kubernetes resources like pods and deployments. Now we will quickly switch on to the second user here. And I'm going to do an API operation to view the pods. See, previously, when there was no Kubernetes RBAC role for this user, you can clearly see the error message. But once I applied the role, you can see how the user is able to view the internal resources of Kubernetes. Now, I definitely want to stop here. And does it make sense, guys? So far, it might be a bit confusing, I understand. Um, but as I give more examples, right, it will be more clear for you. So far, are you getting it? Does it make sense? And open to questions also. I hope all are okay. Um, just stop me if you have any questions.
Uh,
Someone is talking.
yeah, hi, I'm
Yeah, Vedant. Yeah, please tell me.
audible.
Yeah, you're audible. Yep.
Hello.
You're audible. Am I audible, guys? You can give a thumbs up if I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. So Vedant, I can
Yes, you're
hear
audible.
you. Vishwas.
So, let us
So Vishwas, when providing RBAC Kubernetes RBAC to service accounts, it's the same concept. Like whatever role that you give, that's applied for the service account. Depends on what RBAC role you give. In our example, for this user, I've given a cluster role, which allows to view the internal resources. Okay, so service account, it's still the same as an user. Whatever role that you give, depending on that, the service account will be able to perform the operations accordingly. So also, I want to quickly show you where I configure the intra group that I showed to you. So when creating a Kubernetes cluster, you'll choose this authentication method. Okay, in our case, it's a Kubernetes RBAC, and you choose the intra group here. So basically, we are attaching an admin for the Kubernetes cluster. See, as you can see here, Kubernetes cluster admin cluster role binding. So whatever group that we attach here gets the cluster admin access, which is nothing but a full access. Okay. So until now, I hope we are clear. And I'll also show you. I'm going to remove this role, and immediately you can see the effect. Okay. CTL delete -f. I'm just deleting the role that I created, and as you can see the role is gone now. And let me try to do an API operation immediately. So it is evident now with that role, Kubernetes RBAC role, you are able to view the API operations, and you can give multiple roles. So there are predefined rules in Kubernetes. So based on the requirement, multiple roles can be given, and the user or service account can be given in this place. Okay, depending on the requirement, this can be modified. Now that's about the Entra ID with Kubernetes RBAC role. In this method, basically the authentication is made using an Azure RBAC role. When I say authentication, nothing but this command, we enter into the cluster. And once we enter into the cluster to do the API operations, to view the internal resources, we need to get authorized. Authorization is done using the Kubernetes RBAC role. Okay, Kubernetes RBAC role, we just applied it. This is the Kubernetes RBAC role. So this is the one type of authentication when it comes to the AKS cluster. So with this, we move on to the next method of authentication, which is Entra ID with Azure RBAC. So previously it was Entra ID with Kubernetes RBAC. Now it's Entra ID with Azure RBAC. So in this method, you don't have to configure Kubernetes RBAC roles. Okay, there are special Azure RBAC roles to do the API operations, which I will explain and show you a demo. So basically I have two clusters. One is configured with Entra ID with Kubernetes RBAC. I also have another cluster which is using the other method. Entra ID with Azure RBAC. Okay, I want to open this side by side. You can see here, the first cluster is Kubernetes RBAC based cluster. The second one is Azure RBAC based cluster. And how this works, this one works is to do an API operation. It's the same thing. You first need to get authenticated. And let's work for this cluster. The same user, I'm going to show an example with the same user. So for this second cluster, let's see what's the role that's assigned. Two, I have a reader role, and and that's it. I just have a reader role. Okay, and let's see how this works now. So I first remove my existing kubeconfig file. Okay, let me clear it. I'm going to change my cluster name here. So first thing is I'm getting authenticated, which is I'm trying to enter the cluster, which is a Azure RBAC based cluster. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm not able to get authenticated to the cluster. So the authentication here is same as the intra based cluster. The Kubernetes RBAC based cluster. It's the same thing. Okay, I need to assign the same role, which is nothing but these roles to get authenticated. So enter ID with Azure RBAC. These are the roles that is required to get authenticated, similar to what exactly we have seen in the Kubernetes RBAC based cluster also. So the authentication mechanism is same. Just try to understand it very clearly. Authentication mechanism is the same. So here what I will do is I will assign a owner role for this user for this second cluster. Currently, the user has got only reader role. Owner, as you can see, this is the primary user. The second user has not got owner role. I'm going to assign owner role. How to- Okay, perfect. Now the second user has got a owner role. I'm going to switch to the second user's portal and let us try to get authenticated. Guys, if you are getting confused as I show you the full completed right, you'll definitely get some sense and it will be more clear for you. Okay, so no worries. So with the same different types of roles, I'm authenticated to the cluster now, which means I have entered the cluster, but I'll not be able to do any API operations now. Even though I have a owner role, let's try to do an API operation. I'm trying to view the pods. As you can clearly see, it's giving the error message, access related error message now. And now, previously in a Kubernetes RBAC based cluster, we have assigned a role, right? A Kubernetes RBAC role using the manifest. But in this method, Azure RBAC based cluster, there are predefined Azure roles itself, Azure special RBAC roles that you can assign for this user, which will help to do the API operations. And what are those roles? Basically is these are the roles. Okay, AKS RBAC reader, RBAC writer, RBAC admin, RBAC cluster admin. So for example, this role I can assign, which is a special role, Azure Kubernetes Service RBAC reader role, which will help to view everything, most of the things. Right? These are the special RBAC roles. So now you see the difference, right? Previously in the other cluster, first cluster, Kubernetes RBAC based cluster, you assigned a role binding, which is a Kubernetes roles outside of your Azure. It's not cloud native roles. So these are all Azure native roles, inbuilt roles actually. You don't have to create any of this. I'll just show that to you. So these are the inbuilt RBAC roles. RBAC admin, RBAC cluster admin, RBAC writer, and RBAC reader. Okay, forget about these roles. Okay, these roles are something for fleet manager. You don't get confused. And Kubernetes service, this is the main roles that you need to be aware of. Now, this user who does not have any access to the API operation, he has got owner role though, he's able to get authenticated. But to get Authorized, we need to assign any of this role depending on what he needs to do. Let's say he just wants to view the pod, and I'm going to assign a role. So current role for this user is owner and also reader. Okay. For Anand Rao 2, it's reader and only owner. Going to assign a role. RBAC reader.
Sir, I think
Yeah. Can you hear me?
the time was up.
Yeah,
Yes,
time
sir,
was
we
up.
can hear you.
That's right. Because 1 hour, since I'm using a free Teams, right? I'm not using an organization Teams. So it got kicked out, but we can restart now. Hope you're able to see me. Sorry, hear me, and let me share my screen.
Yes,
Just
sir,
give it,
you
yeah.
coming up.
Okay, perfect. So just give a thumbs up, guys, if you're able to see my screen. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so where we were is I was trying to give access, right, for this user. Kubernetes service RBAC reader I have given. So this second user not able to view anything previously, and now I have given a Kubernetes service RBAC reader, which is an inbuilt role, Kubernetes special RBAC role. Okay, now let's try to view the pods. As you can clearly see here, it is not having any pods basically, but there are no error messages in this cluster. I have not created any pods. Okay, so basically this user is now able to view the pods. Maybe in the default namespace there should be some pods. Okay, so okay, as you can see, once I have given the Azure RBAC special role, this user is able to view the pods. And similarly, I can give other roles also. For example, I can give a Kubernetes service RBAC writer role. which will help to delete the pod, deploy the pod, and all that. Okay, so you can go through this. What there are four different types of roles mainly. So you can go through this slide and you'll understand what role does what. Okay. So this is the clear difference between a Kubernetes RBAC based cluster and your Azure RBAC based cluster. Okay. So just to reiterate, the thing is with authentication, it's the same role that is required. Okay. For authentication in both type of clusters, you need the same role, which is nothing but these roles. Okay. And don't confuse these roles with this roles, guys. Okay, it might be a bit confusing. So as you can see here, this is a Kubernetes service cluster user role which is used for authentication, and what you are saying, the special RBAC roles is different. That is Kubernetes service RBAC roles. So these are Kubernetes service RBAC roles, and this is different, which is used for the authentication, right? Those roles are different. So, I mean, in simple terms, with the Kubernetes RBAC based cluster, you'll have to define your roles separately, which is not inbuilt roles. But when it comes to Azure RBAC based cluster, you have inbuilt roles that you can assign for the users. That's the major difference that you need to be aware of. Okay, now maybe definitely we'll take some questions. So control plane operations, yes, good question, Coundinya. So basically control plane operations, right? Like the infra level resources that can be controlled by the basic Azure roles. Like if you give a reader role, they'll be able to view your control plane. Okay, so you need to restrict the reader role. And if you give contributor, they'll be able to do the control plane operations. So depending on what action they want to take in the control plane, you can control it accordingly. So basically to answer this, you just give a reader role so that they are only able to view the control plane and they are not able to do any control plane operation like node pool upgrade or version upgrade or virtual network changes or something like that. Yes, we can control it by only giving a reader role. And the other question is, assume RBAC is more fine. Exactly. This is the right point, Vishwas. So when it comes to Kubernetes RBAC based cluster, you can do more granular control because this YAML manifest that I told you, there are multiple roles. But when it comes to Azure RBAC, it gives you only 4 different roles by default, the inbuilt roles, right? But here you have multiple granular roles that you can assign it to the user depending on the requirement. Okay, but what I have seen is in most of the Azure projects or Azure based deployments, they go for Azure RBAC based clusters because it simplifies the role assignments, because you can assign the inbuilt roles rather than going for a non cloud native roles. But this is exactly the right point. Okay, fine grained control when we go for a Kubernetes RBAC based cluster. So that's the only 2 questions I see. And guys, I understand that this, I'm not sure if how much impact that this might make, this session might make to you guys. So, but just wanted to hear. So, are any more questions, or is it more confusing? Here, silence. And let me just remove this role, okay, for the user and show it to you. Okay, so once I removed the role, immediately it's reflecting. Okay, the user is not able to view any of the pods. And once again, I am assigning the role. Sometimes it takes some time to reflect. So I removed the kubeconfig file which has got the authentication. Okay, and I will show you when I run kubectl get pods. So first thing is, if kubeconfig is what is holding your authentication profile. Okay, so if you remove the kubeconfig, you need to re-authenticate to your cluster. So how do you re-authenticate? Is nothing but the command that we used, right? We just run this command and get re-authenticated to the cluster. I'm re-authenticated to the cluster, and now the role has kicked in. Okay, so for the default namespace it seems to be working, and cube system. Okay. Okay, this one sometimes takes some refresh and takes some time to reflect. So when we apply this role, it applies to all the namespaces. Okay, and you cannot control this basically. So with Azure RBAC based clusters, you cannot control. So for example, if you want to assign this role to a particular namespace, you cannot do it. And but with Kubernetes RBAC rule, you can do a fine-grained access control. Right, that's the advantage of, if you want a more fine granular control, you can use the Kubernetes based cluster, RBAC based cluster. So as you can see here, you can pass a namespace. So only for the default namespace, this user will have the cluster role. But when it comes to the Azure RBAC special roles, you are assigning it at the Azure AKS level itself. You don't have an option to assign it at the namespace level. Okay, so that's another thing to highlight. Yeah, as you can see here, it took some time to reflect, but now we are able to see all the pods. All right, so this is the difference between Kubernetes RBAC and Azure RBAC based cluster. Okay, so there is another topic that I want to jump into, which is the local accounts. Okay, we have an option called local accounts. With both these methods, you can configure local accounts. Okay, local accounts has got some drawbacks, which I will explain now. Okay, so Vedant has got a question. What's the use case of workload identity? Okay, so Vedant, the workload identity is something different outside of this authentication topic itself, but I'll just let you know what exactly it is. So, suppose I'll give an example. So, let's say that your auto scaling requirement is there for a project. Okay, so to do an auto scaling, your Kubernetes should understand the trigger point. For example, if there is a HTTP request, or if there is a monitoring system in your AKS environment, and basically let's say that based on your HTTP request, your Kubernetes should scale up. And in this case, what we can do is your Kubernetes should have access to the monitoring system so that it can understand the traffic HTTP requests. So how will it get access to that monitoring system is you will use a workload identity for your Kubernetes cluster. It will be attached with a workload identity, and this workload identity will be given access to that monitoring system. So that's the use case of a workload identity. Okay, so Vishwas has got another question. Should I have so that I can make Entra ID group membership changes to control cluster admins? Okay, very good question. So let's say that your question, if I understood it correctly, so you want to modify this group basically, right? That's what is your question, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this Entra group can be modified by cluster admins. Okay, this whoever is part of this group, right? This guy member will be able to modify this group because this is an API operation. Modifying this is an API operation. So whoever has got the cluster admin role, which I had shown here, this group. Okay, this group, any user who is part of this can change the group. Okay, once that group is, for example, this group is modified to some other group, this members of this group will lose the access, right? So whoever is part of the new group, they'll be able to do cluster observations because they are cluster admins, new cluster admins. So this is the group. Users of this group will be able to modify that.
Is there a way to prevent that?
Okay, so is the way to prevent that is, so this group has got complete access. The only way is you need to remove the users from that group. Okay, so by default, this is kind of break glass admin.
Mhm.
So whoever is part of this group, we are giving them full control. Okay, and if you want to restrict that, basically we configure only one admin for the Entra group. Okay, and that is the only admin who will be able to assign roles. So this is a very highly sensitive group, so you should not add multiple members to this group.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Okay. Um, okay, now I want to jump into the local accounts. I hope, how about the time, guys? Since we started 1 hour back, are we okay to continue? Okay, Vishwas, give a thumbs up. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. All right. So there is a basically a loophole that I want to explain. Okay, so Kubernetes. So with both the type of clusters, you can enable local accounts. So that- so with the RBAC based cluster also you have this option, and with Kubernetes based cluster also you have this option, right? So I'll show you an example what happens with this. Okay.
So I just apply enable this local accounts.
This is something it is not recommended basically. I want to show how a AKS cluster can be hacked when using this local accounts.
And I removed the role. Actually, this is a RBAC Kubernetes RBAC based cluster. There is no role binding for any user.
And I just authenticated to the Kubernetes RBAC
Base cluster, and there is no role assignment. Okay, and hence I'm getting this error message. Now local accounts is getting enabled on this cluster. Let's see, I'll show you what happens after that. Okay, perfect. Now local accounts is enabled. We just remove the authentication profile, and once local account is enabled, you can authenticate as an admin user. Okay, so to authenticate as an admin user, we just add the extra admin at the end of the command.
So previously we used
Just this command without the admin to get authenticated.
but to authenticate
As an admin, we use the command
hyphen admin at the end.
okay. So as you can see here, this user now,
Has got authenticated as an admin.
and let us see if he's able to view any pods. Okay, he's able to view the pods,
But this user has not got any Kubernetes RBAC role.
right? So if you get role binding here, it's not got any role.
But since he has logged in as an admin, he's able to view the pods and he'll be able to do any operation in this cluster. Write operation, delete operation,
Any API operation for the internal resources, this user will be able to do it.
because this user has got the privilege to get authenticated as an admin user.
Okay, he has got an owner role, which lets him get authenticated as an admin. Okay.
So basically now what happens is, since there are no special roles, this config file that is downloaded right from this system, so currently it is inside the Cloud Shell, this config file can be transferred to another system basically, and that user can use that authentication profile and able to do any API operation.
I'll show that as I'll try to prove that also. So first thing is, let me try to uh, download this config file. Okay, so now I have downloaded this config file. What I'll do is I'll remove this config file. Okay, just remove the config file, so you cannot do anything now. Your authentication profile is removed now. Now without re-authenticating, I'll use the same config file and I will show you what happens. Okay, I'll also remove all the roles for this user. All that I have is reader role. Okay, I'll just give the reader role. So with this owner only, he's able to authenticate. Okay, just removing that also. So now authentication profile is removed, so it is asking me to authenticate again. Okay, and let me try to authenticate. And why is this, guys? I hope you are clear, because I removed my owner role, which is used to authenticate, which is used to allow me into the cluster. Okay, I removed that role. So currently I don't have any access at all except the reader role. Now what I will do is, I will the config file that I downloaded previously, I'll just try to upload that. Okay, currently it is inside my home, and I need to move that to the .cube folder. Okay, so you can see inside I have moved the config folder which I previously deleted. Now let me see if I'm able to do these operations. So I'm with the previous config file, I'm able to do the API operation even though I don't have any role apart from reader role. Okay, similarly, another user also, this config file can be transferred to another user also, and they will be able to do any API operation in the cluster, because this config file has got the admin credentials, admin related login. But without the admin, right? For example, without enabling the local admin, let's say only with this command,
you get a config file, you get an authentication profile, right? That cannot be transferred to another user, and another user cannot do the API operations, because when you use without the admin, it uses a token based a certificate based authentication. Okay, so you cannot simply transfer as authentication profile to another user, and that user cannot do the API operations. Only with an admin credentials, your config that's getting downloaded is transferable, which is very unsecure. So that's what I wanted to prove with this local authentication method. All right, so with this, almost we are close to the end of the session. So any questions? Any more questions from anyone? Okay, more than one. Yeah, one authentication profile. Yeah, Subrat. So basically, the authentication profile that we download, right? Only if it's an admin based profile, it will be used, can be used by another user. But in case if it's not an admin profile, right? So let's say you have not enabled the local accounts here, when we have the other cluster which is enabled with local accounts. So if this is not enabled, you will not be able to run this command. You will not be able to run this hyphen hyphen admin command. So you cannot download a profile and transfer it to someone else. The problem is only when you have your cluster with local accounts enabled, and when you authenticate using hyphen hyphen admin, that is when your profile can be used from a different user's context. That's why we should not enable the local account. I hope that answers Subrat. And Vedant, I definitely let me share my profile. Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Vishwas. And I still have an Azure DevOps pipeline, guys, and we ran out of time. But just one thing is, see, this whole topic is a bit complex. It might be confusing, I understand. And I tried as much as possible to cover, to make you understand. Not sure how you guys understood it. At least if some help I have done today, I'll be really happy. Okay. Okay, so what I'll do is I have written blogs on this. Okay, on the Azure DevOps pipeline also there will be blogs that I have written clearly. I'll share that blog so that you can go through it. So this is the Azure DevOps pipeline, how you need to authenticate. It's same only, whatever I explained. When it comes to DevOps pipeline, there is just one additional step that you need to take care of. That is what I have explained in this article. And I have three parts, authentication explained in three different parts. So you can go through it. All right, and I really want to thank everyone for your interest and also trusting me and being in the session until the end. And just you can be in touch. Any questions, please feel free to reach out to me in LinkedIn. Okay, I'll definitely respond. All right, I hope we can wind up, guys. Share your contact numbers. Yeah, definitely, I will share that. That's my number. Get in touch with WhatsApp or call me. All right, guys. Yes, Silam, you wanted to say something, Himanshu? Yeah.
No, sir, it's okay. I just follow you on a LinkedIn account, so
Okay,
that's
sure.
okay.
Sure, perfect. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Talk to you later. Bye.